Hey, what's up? Erik Garcia here. Thanks for listening to the Stuff About Money podcast. This is part 2 of a series that Xavier and I did with Jessica Burke of Now Wedding Magazine. Part 1, we talked about the financial cost of a wedding, what decisions go into planning a wedding. And in this episode here, we're talking about the 7 financial issues you should discuss before getting married. So if you are getting married yourself, if you know someone who's getting married, or if you have kids who will get married one day, share this with them. Go back and listen to part 1 if you didn't. Listen in. This is really important stuff.
Welcome back to Stuff About Money. I'm Xavier Angel, and I'm joined with my co-host Erik Garcia, your favorite certified financial planner. How are you guys doing today?
I'm the favorite?
You are the favorite. Yes.
I'm the
today.
favorite.
Today.
The favorite. Just today. Okay.
Am I your
Last week-
favorite wedding magazine publisher?
Jessica, you are our favorite wedding magazine publisher. We're joined here again for part 2 of our discussion about weddings with Jessica Burke, publisher of Now Magazine. Jessica, what's happening?
I'm excited to be here talking about money and weddings. It's a big topic that we run into. And it doesn't really get discussed enough, I think. And
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah. It doesn't. So we're going to talk about it. Before we talk about it in our first episode, people, if y'all didn't listen to it, go back and listen to it. We asked the question that we always ask: what's something about money you now know that you wish you would have known 20 years ago? And you said, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff. And I said, you can only share one. But since we're doing 2 parts, we figured we'd give you a pass and let you share a second thing about money. So what's that second thing about money you wish you would have known back in the day?
This is a close second, and honestly, it was about student loans, which I think is a hot topic right now, clearly. I was fortunate in that I have already paid off my student loans. I was able to consolidate a few things due to my circumstances. However, I took loans I didn't actually need to take. I was encouraged to take them to give a cushion, to have spending money. I was working throughout college. I technically did not need the money. And it was just, I'm thinking back, that was really, I didn't need to take those loans. I didn't need to take that money, and I didn't need to have that interest accruing and all of that. And it was something that I wish I had thought through a little bit more and not just said, oh, sure, you're handing me a loan. I'll take it.
Yeah.
So,
That is great advice. I hear people say that on a regular basis. I wish I didn't take this out because I didn't need it.
Yeah.
What that does too is debt tricks us into thinking that we can live a higher lifestyle than we can actually afford.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems. That's one of like the things about even if you pay your credit card every month, man, it's so much easier to swipe a card than to use cash or whatever. Like it doesn't make the same connection. So debt tricks us into thinking that we can live higher than we really can.
Yeah.
The problem is not many people are carrying cash anymore.
No.
How much cash do you have on you, Erik?
I actually have a lot right now because my kid, she'll babysit or something. She'll do something. She'll get cash and she'll give it to me and say, "Hey, could you put this in my bank account?" Well, I can't remotely deposit cash. It doesn't work. I tried. It doesn't work. So I'll hold on to it and I'll just transfer her money. So I probably have more than I normally do. But I used to never have cash until she started. I don't know where she gets her cash from. Anyway.
Young entrepreneur. You're teaching them
Part
right.
2.
Yep.
Part two. So we're going to talk about these are just 7 things that rose to the top, 7 issues about money that couples should talk about when getting married. Yes. I want to take a step back real quick though and share a couple of things here. So probably it was over 10 years ago, I started collaborating with a good friend of mine, couples counselor, Dr. Matt Morris. We had an entire podcast show. It's called Building Us, Invest in Your Relationships. Okay. And here's how it came about. He came to me one day and said, "Hey, look, I was counseling this couple and this was their issue. I think it was a money thing. This is the advice I gave. Was it good advice?" I'm like, "Yeah, that was actually good, sound advice." Yeah. And then we started talking how he's like, money comes up often in couples counseling, and counselors, we're just not taught about money. We're not comfortable talking about money. So we don't address this major issue in marriages, and it's problematic. So him and I, we actually started co-presenting. We presented at several counselor association meetings. And the idea was to up counselors' knowledge or comfort with money so that if these topics came up, they felt at least comfortable not to give financial advice, but comfortable enough to discuss them. because a lot of us are dealing with our own, financial mistakes, much less other people. So we're just not comfortable talking about it. So we started collaborating, and we actually came up with it was like a program, an offering. We called it Building Us, where Matt would deliver his premarital counseling program, and they would talk about things about intimacy, communication, all the stuff. And it was designed. There were sessions before the wedding, and there were sessions during the first year. And I thought it was brilliant. So I said, Matt, let me design a segment to talk about money, about things that people need to talk about from a financial standpoint. So, man, we got so much feedback from that, and we're still collaborating today. But when two people come together, right, in marriage, I don't care whether you're religious or spiritual, there's this commitment that hey, I want to spend my life with you.
Yeah.
I like you, you like me, and we're gonna come together. We're gonna become we're gonna become one unit and unify.
Yeah.
Okay, and it makes sense that if that's the case, we should be rowing in the same direction, not just with our interests, like we like to travel, but we should be rowing in the same direction with our money.
Yeah.
And Matt would always say this. This is brilliant. He goes, your wedding is one day, your marriage is a lifetime.
Yes. Absolutely.
Your marriage is one day, your wedding is a lifetime. And people spend so much time planning one day and not very much time planning their lifetime.
Yeah. They forget that, I mean, everything focuses on the big day. All the ads and all of the marketing goes towards that experience. And I mean, it's really what from little kids, that's what we're told. Oh, hey, let's go have this big party. They go to parties. You expect that you're going to have the same thing. And you don't really think about what happens. It's sometimes a huge rush just to have the wedding, And
Yeah. So what I want to talk about are some of the issues. We have 7. We'll probably, some of them will kind of bleed into the others, and we'll probably talk about other ones just as we discuss here.
Mm-hmm.
But these are 7 issues that if you are getting married, or if you're currently married and you've never discussed this, you might want to have these. You might want to discuss these issues. So, number 1 is you need to identify who's going to be doing the certain financial responsibilities in the marriage.
Yes.
Right? So people are gifted in different things.
Yes.
Right. Xavier and I we're obviously not married, but when you're in a business together, there is a certain unity in a business that's similar to a marriage in terms of making decisions. And Xavier and I will often talk about how our different skill sets fit together perfectly.
Yes.
We bring different tools to the table.
And and another part of that discussion is we don't make any decision without bringing that other individual into it. Erik had talked about earlier what he and Matt were doing, and I wish I would have known that program when we got married 15 years ago. I think that would save what people going through that would save a lot of marriages. When we first got married, we didn't sit down and share our finances. Everything was separate. Maureen wanted to sit down and that question was always, how much do you make? What are you making? But because of what I do and that random income, one month it may be here, next month it may be here, and then it bounces back up there. Yeah. I couldn't give her a definitive answer, and we just never had that conversation. And that was one of our biggest arguments that we had over the first year.
Oh, wow.
I've learned over the years that I have to come to the table, and whether it's with Maureen, whether it's with Erik, have those conversations when it comes to finances and making those decisions.
So in y'all's experiences in each of your marriages, I'm curious, do you find that there are certain things that financially that you're better at than your spouse is?
Ooh. I know I tend to be a little bit more conservative. On the conservative side, my husband is much more of he does plan. He has the money in the 401k. He does all of that, but he is more of hey, live in the moment, enjoy the experience, not stress about all of that. And I'm more, just because of how I grew up and my circumstances, planning for the future, like, okay, let's not get in over our heads,
Yeah.
things like that, so, it's a definite difference in how we approach things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So one of you might be more equipped
Yeah.
to deal with the daily budget.
Yes. Yes. And honestly,
And, my guess is
yeah.
based off of what you said, your husband's probably not the one who wants to follow the budget or deal with the budget.
Not so much. I'm the one that will implement things
Yeah.
like, creating the menu for the week so we know what we're eating, so I don't have to order out and spend a small fortune on takeout
Yeah.
every week. And he's more like, if I'm not there to do it, it's takeout every night.
So in the financial space, I didn't like there's I remember I was meeting with a couple, and we have this really cool financial assessment that I could give it to the husband, I can give it to the wife, and then we can overlay it.
Yeah.
So I can see really quickly their differences in their skill sets financially. Okay. So for instance, one of the things is confidence. We test on confidence, and she had very low confidence in making financial decisions.
Wow.
He had very high confidence in making financial decisions. And then one of the questions was, we test for is planning and monitoring. So like, how good are you at making a plan and sticking to it? Okay.
Yeah.
And in overlaying, he had confidence, she didn't. She had very low planning and monitoring. So, I asked this very simple question: who pays the bills? And he's like, oh, I pay the bills. And I turned to her. I said, do you feel like you know what's going on, financially? And these are professionals, okay? And it's like, yeah, I really don't know. I really don't, I mean, I trust him and but I really don't know what's going on financially. So I turned to him and I said, hey, do you have a problem if she sits in with you when you pay the bills? He's like, no, like this, we just default. I just pay the bills. And that's just kind of how we defaulted to it. They came back. We met about 2 or 3 months later, and they had made some huge financial decisions that she had input in just because she all of a sudden had more confidence because she was involved in something that she had the skill set that she should have been doing.
Yes.
Right. And one of the things that we talked about prior to us getting on, we talked about giving our spouses that fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah.
Allowing one of those spouses to make a decision on behalf of both of us.
Yes.
And I think a lot of couples go through that right now. Look, Maureen pays all the bills, right? Yeah. I just, because I do what I do, I choose not to sit down and go through it when I get home. So I've given her that fiduciary responsibility just to let me know what you need and just write that check, pay that bill.
Right.
So I have full faith in her.
Let's contextualize this fiduciary responsibility and contextualize that conversation, because it sounds weird to talk about like fiduciary responsibility in a marriage. Like, I have fiduciary responsibility for my wife. Like, kind of silly. So we were, I made the analogy. I was sharing an experience with Xavier, and my wife, she just doesn't like talking about money. It's just not her favorite thing. So when I bring it up, she's like, I trust you, you make a decision. And whenever someone says, I trust you, you make the decision, all of a sudden, I feel like there's this extra weightiness.
It's a burden. Yeah.
Well, burden, maybe responsibility, right?
Go.
Yeah. Burden. Like, so in our client planning relationship, we have fiduciary responsibility to give advice to our clients that is in their best interest. So when my wife says, hey, Erik, you make the decision, like all of a sudden, I feel like I've got this fiduciary responsibility to make a good decision for her, because here's what we see. And you've probably seen this with your friends. Maybe you've experienced this yourself. What tends to happen, particularly with money, and it's not like you said, it's not talked about. And Matt and I think we did an entire show on this. We call it financial infidelity.
Sounds so scary.
Right? Someone in the relationship is making decisions with money that they're hiding. That they're being unfaithful with their money to the other partner.
Yes.
Okay. That it's not in line with their goals, it's not in line with their values, and they're hiding it. Infidelity is kind of the antithesis of fiduciary, right? In a fiduciary relationship, I have to be faithful to making a decision that is in your best interest. Infidelity is unfaithfulness. So if someone in the marriage relationship is making investment decisions, right, because that's what they're skilled to, right? They have the temperament
Yeah.
to make those decisions. And the other person could care less or is just doesn't have the temper. It makes them nervous to watch the stock market. See that all the time, right? The person making those decisions now has to make an investment decision, get this, that's not necessarily in line with their risk tolerance, but something that's in line with the couple's collective risk tolerance, a fiduciary responsibility. And that's what I was talking about, right? There's a faithfulness to our peace of mind in making this decision with our investments.
Yeah. Not doing something too risky or, and blowing all your money. I mean, it can be scary.
Yeah, that's no good.
No.
That's no good. So part two, we talked about this idea of some people have skills and really identifying those and talking through that. The second thing here, and this is a big one, do you plan on combining finances?
Oh, that's an interesting one. And honestly, I don't think there's a correct or incorrect answer. I've done it both ways. I've been married twice, and the first time we never had a joint bank account. And it honestly worked out for me when we split up. But it also, was
in hindsight, that was a good decision.
It was an excellent decision. Maybe subconsciously I knew. I don't know. I now, and it's interesting. I wouldn't say all of our money is in the same accounts. We do have a joint bank account, my husband and I. But I do have, another a bank account that I pay for things out of myself. And so, and that's actually just a very recent thing. We just always paid out of the joint account. And I'm like, you know what? I need some money so that I can go buy his Christmas present without him finding out about it, and, just little things like that. So it's not a lack of trust factor. It's just, most of the money goes into there, but then some goes into this other account.
Right. So that conversation or that decision was made once you guys sat down and had a conversation about finances prior to actually getting married and making that decision?
I feel like it just happened. We didn't have a full on conversation about it, but I don't know, maybe I just felt a lot more confidence in this relationship. And I didn't even change my name for the first marriage, and I did for this one. And so I don't know, maybe, like I said, maybe I knew. And, I never had a problem joining finances. I felt like he wasn't going to spend without talking to me on major things. Like we don't consult on tiny little things like, day-to-day expenses or minor expenses. If we're going to do something massive, it's a conversation. Like, if we're going to do the spray foam insulation in the attic, which was a great decision, by the way, we looked at all the different options and decided on the one that was going to be best for us. So, the bigger things we do tend to talk about, but the smaller things kind of just happen,
Yeah. So your experience is good, but y'all never sat down and had the conversation. Having that conversation is really, really important. So, we talk about combining finances. There's a lot of aspects to combining finance. In part three, or number three is kind of related to that about maintaining separate accounts.
Yes.
There's some accounts that need to be maintained separately, like retirement accounts.
Yes.
But you bring up a really good point about I just didn't want him to know that I was buying him something for Christmas, right?
Yeah.
So number one, congratulations to him for keeping such close tabs on money out of the account. Most people don't keep track of money in, money out. So that's really good. That's a good skill. It's a good skill. You got to know where your money's going, right?
Yes.
But I'm a fan of combining accounts.
Yes.
But I agree with you. The answer should be. It depends. I mean, there are some factors that make sense not to combine. But let me go back to what my opening remarks is. When you're making a decision to get married, you're becoming one, right? Because we clearly have long-term goals and long-term visions. It's like Xavier and I starting a business. And I said, look, man, I got 50,000, you got 50,000. You go build the business the way you think it should be built, and I'll go build the business the way I think it should be built. Any business coach would say, that's the stupidest business plan ever.
Yeah.
It'll never work.
So even if we kept separate accounts, it becomes really important that we're making decisions in alignment with each other.
Yes.
And that's what I would say. If you got separate accounts, that's cool. But just make sure that, I hear often, this is what I hear a lot from couples. I pay the mortgage and the car note, and then she has money to buy groceries and kid stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. why not just put it in one place? Like,
Yeah.
Then are you tracking, like, I spent more than her? I just feel like sometimes that can create this, especially if there's a discrepancy in income.
Yeah. It
That
can leave one
becomes,
partner.
yeah, like one
Feeling-
person's making a lot of money and one person's not. And
Yeah.
then there's like this, then there becomes this dynamic, like, oh, I don't want to spend the money because she's making more than me. And I want to, it's like, no, man, like
No,
when you
it's not
see it all as
healthy.
one,
Yeah.
you there's almost like an equality, right?
Yeah.
It's more egalitarian, if you will.
Yeah.
And I've seen it the other way as well. I've seen it where that individual who's not making as much,
Yeah.
it allows that individual to still feel like he or she is contributing
Yes.
to the relationship from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
Because that individual knows, hey, look, my significant other is making more than me.
Yeah.
But they're still being able to contribute, even if it's just taking care of the stuff for the kids.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
So
hold on.
I think there's two sides to it.
On that point, every Mother's Day, I like to bring up the salary.com post that basically says, you talk about a stay-at-home mom or mom at home with the kids. Like, if you were to put a dollar amount on all the hats and the roles that a stay-at-home mom plays,
Oh, you couldn't afford it.
you go, I've got a
No
blog.
one.
It's one of my top ranking blog posts. It's I can't afford my wife. This was back in the day when she was home. We were homeschooling,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
I think I
wow.
would owe her like $147,000 a year in salary for like
Oh, nice.
private chef, private chauffeur, counseling services, therapist, nurse.
Yeah. Sometimes
And-
those
and I
tasks,
think-
they
Right. I think that's starting to shift as well.
Yeah.
Now you're starting to see more of the professional woman making more than the husband, and the husband staying at home.
Yeah.
So I think we're starting to see a shift in that as well.
Yeah.
I don't.
So
Yeah.
So having that conversation before you get married is a really good conversation to have about, are we going to join? How are we going to do this?
The only place I'd say having a separate one is having an actual wedding planning account. Like, put your money in that account so you don't go.
Well, you're
crazy
talking about
spending.
something totally different.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so that is it's a separate account for a specific purpose. I love that
Yes.
idea. I'm a
Yeah,
huge
yeah.
fan
Right.
of attaching. I love it when clients have a goal and we name the bank account after the goal.
I love that. Yeah.
So Jessica,
Mhm.
what do you name that account? Share with us what you call that account.
So the wedding planning account, you could
Yes.
call it your wedding fund, your honey fund. There's actually a website called the Honey Fund that
The
you
Honey
can
Fund.
Right.
crowdsource your wedding.
And
planning.
that's what caught my attention.
Honey
You call it you named it the Honey Fund.
Yeah, there's an actual website that it was originally developed to be a honeymoon registry where you could get, instead of guests buying you a thing, they could pay for part of your honeymoon. I know they've expanded to literally everything, buying a house, paying for your wedding, all this other stuff. So it's interesting. It's a little bit controversial, but definitely becoming more accepted these days. So it's interesting.
Yeah, no, I've been invited to several weddings where the registry is honeymoon stuff. Buy me dinner at this restaurant, this outing. I think that's fantastic. I love that
kinda
idea.
Love it. I love it. I like the idea of less things and more experiences. And with like my kids, they have so many toys they don't play with. I'm like, why? Let's
Right.
have them have an experience instead of buying them another thing that they're going to step on and break in 2 weeks.
My wife and I were debating, like, do we get rid of the china? Like, we've never used it. Like,
Yeah.
it's taking up cabinet space. Like, that's
Yeah.
man, I would have loved an outing. We went to St. Martin's for honeymoon. I would have loved someone to pay for our parasailing outing. That'd been great.
Mhm.
That'd been
Yeah.
great. All right, so number 4, I've lost track. I don't know. I gave Xavier a hard time last week about not being able to count, and now I'm the one. I don't even know where I'm at. So I think we're on 4 or 5.
Touche.
4 or 5. What goes around comes around. Debt.
Yeah.
Have a conversation with your fiance about debt.
Yes.
Whew,
Yes.
I don't know who it was, but we were having a conversation, and they were talking about their engagement to their first. Well, they never got married, to their
Yeah.
first fiance,
Yeah.
and the issue of debt came up, and she found out they had like 100, some absurd number, like over 6 figures of credit card debt.
Oh.
And then she's like, you know what? She cut it off. Like, if he couldn't disclose that and had such bad habits to accrue that much debt, Now, I'm not saying don't marry someone who has a lot of debt because
Yeah.
people could have changed. Like, they could have changed a heart. But what I'm
Right.
saying is,
But know what you're getting into.
yeah,
Yeah.
go in eyes wide open.
Yes, I mean, exactly. You don't want to have to be working to pay off somebody else's bad habits, and maybe they're not changed. Maybe they're still doing that and building more debt, and you don't want to be stuck in that. It's not worth it. So
Yeah, because debt is and we started this conversation off with debt, right? You shared about your
Right.
debt's heavy.
yeah,
Debt's heavy. Our third pillar of financial security is squash debt. Now we get there's good debt and there's bad debt, or there's more acceptable debt and bad debt.
Yeah.
But man, debt is bad. And one of the things that Dr. Matt and I would do when we were presenting is I would present more the financial side of what, how to avoid getting into debt, how to get out of debt. And then Matt would talk about, and this was fascinating, he would talk about what that looks like clinically when a couple you're counseling has a lot of debt.
Yeah.
And what that does and how that erodes the couple relationship.
it's no good, and you honestly have so much pressure on you to pay for things that you can't function in the relationship. I've seen people killing themselves to pay for things that I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, you're putting yourself in this debt for what? Is this ultimately worth it? And it's one of those societal expectations. We have to have what the neighbors next door have type of thing.
Well, it's the dream house, right? One thing I talk about often is young people try to accumulate in 5 years what it took their parents 30 years to accumulate.
Exactly. I mean,
That's one of the things. That's one of my biggest financial regrets is I had this idea that I had to have a custom built house as soon as I possibly could. And it's like, right?
You go through phases as you mature, and where I was 20 years ago is very different than where I am now. And if I had to try to live where I am now 20 years ago, I would have been very miserable right now. And it's a little bit of patience is what, and
we all
patience and
mature.
hard work.
We all get wisdom.
Yeah.
It's the gray hair. Each gray hair is one bad decision I made, and that's a lesson. It's a lesson learned.
Well, there you go.
That sounds good, huh? Yeah. All right. Another one of our issues, again, maybe I think we're on 5 here. We kind of touched on already, was this idea of when you're getting married, you're bringing in your own risk tolerance, your own investment goals with somebody else's. So oftentimes those goals are not in alignment. And I'm not talking about we want to buy a house on the beach. I'm talking about I am saving, I am investing, I am allocating X amount of my money to my investments, and I am putting it all on this one company, kind of like what you were talking about earlier. And you're like, no, I'm a little more conservative. I want to be safe. Oh my gosh, the market's down. My account lost $1. It's too risky.
Yeah.
No, my account's down 100,000. It's good because it's going to come back. Like those are really important things because that deals with our emotions. And when our emotions are off,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where you are in life does depend too. Like when the market crashed in 2008, my accounts took a huge hit. We lost thousands, but I wasn't planning to use them right then. So for me, it wasn't. I was like, okay, well, it'll recover, it'll come back. It's not that big of a deal. But for someone that was about to retire and lost everything, it's a much bigger circumstance to be facing. And so I don't know. I guess the diversification there is where it becomes important.
You're about to get a 4th job as a financial planner, Jessica.
But
Careful.
It comes back as having those conversations with your spouse. I mean, you guys, you looked at what your goal is for the future, and you also know what your current goals are.
Yeah.
And having those conversations allow you not to panic as a couple in 2008.
Yeah. I that's why I tend to be. I'm not completely adverse to risk, but I also want to be. I want to be looking to the future. I want to be looking to that, but I don't want to put all of my eggs in one basket, so to speak. It's thinking about having that money in different places where it can work for me to my advantage should one thing go belly up, Yeah. So,
cool. So having that investment conversation is important. These last 2, I'm going to combine 6 and 7, because I think that they're 2 separate issues, but for the sake of time, we'll just kind of combine them here. And it's do your beneficiary designations need to be changed on retirement accounts and life insurance or other insurance accounts? And here's why that's important, especially for those of you who are on number 2 the second marriage,
Yep.
it's not uncommon to come across life insurance policies. We're like, who's that person? Oh, that was my first husband. I need to change. Yeah, you better change your. Do you want him to get all your life insurance money? Because there's no chance that so got to check those things.
Yes. Yes, it's really important. I mean, I think just checking through every couple years, or heck, even every year. I think when I first set up my life insurance policy with Xavier, I was in a different place. And we realized, oh gosh, no, I want this money to go to my kids and my husband, not to whoever else, know. And you just forget. You put things on autopilot, you pay the bill every month, and you don't realize what's going to happen. And it'll start a fight because people get greedy when someone dies and there's money on the table. Let's just face it.
Absolutely.
And
I'll take that a step further. Often what I find is people they get divorced, and the first thing they do is change those beneficiaries to children.
Yes.
You want to review that as well. You want to see where those children are.
Yeah.
Age plays a big part in beneficiaries when you're naming children as your beneficiary. So, really sit down, think about what you're doing, who you're naming as those beneficiaries, and review it on a regular basis.
That's actually the last point. The one I was combining with changing beneficiaries, Xavier, is exactly that. If you have kids from previous marriage, you got to have that discussion. That has a huge impact on. Look, it's. I mean, we see this in the work that we do, where there's a second marriage and there's kids and there's unequal treatment of kids, and one spouse doesn't like it, and we've seen second marriages fall apart because of financial stuff, because I want to take care of my kid, and that stuff it's problematic. So having those conversations in advance of getting married, putting it all out on the table. This is stuff that you don't want to be surprised with, like, oh, you have $100,000 of debt. Oh, you've got a previous kid. Oh, right. All your money's tied up in some startup tech company, right? Like,
so my final thought, right, is if you want your children to be listed as a beneficiary, I am a huge proponent of creating at will. And for those children that are minors, create a trust.
Exactly.
If you want the children as your beneficiaries, create a trust and have those children as a beneficiary of the trust.
That's a Lagniappe issue right there. That'd be number 8. That's a Lagniappe, a little something extra,
There you
y'all. So for those of y'all not in New Orleans and you have no idea what I just said, Lagniappe, that's a French word that we use down here. It means a little something extra for free.
Extra. Yes.
No cost. There you go.
Yeah.
Jessica, this has been great.
It has been. Thank you for
having me.
having
This is awesome.
me.
Yeah, we might have to. When I told Dr. Matt that I was having you on, we're going to talk about weddings. He was like, "Oh, can I come?" I said, "Well, maybe next time. Maybe next time."
Do another one.
So
I'll come
we'll
back.
have to do
It's all
another
good.
one when you launch your podcast.
Yes.
Let us know.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're getting those balls rolling right now. It's happening.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
Excited. Yeah.
Well, thanks again. Y'all, if y'all like what you're listening, follow us, share this on social, find us on YouTube. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much.